And I'm happy you guys are back
Yes,
to
live and in person.
yeah, yeah. Um can you tell me what your first exposure was to Alvin Ailey?
Mine was growing up in Miami, Florida. I'm from the neighborhood of Liberty City, in Miami. And I remember I was around 12 years old when we were bused to see the company in a mini performance for students from different neighborhoods. And I'd already seen videotapes and things like that from teachers of mine, but it blew my mind to see them live and in person, to see Revelations. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
When did you know you wanted to dance, to become a dancer and choreographer?
I think it was that moment, really, of seeing the company, of seeing, I grew up in the church and grew up, my mother played piano, we're speaking about
Yeah.
our similarities, played piano for the church that we went to, and led the choir, and I sang in the choir, and she had a group called the Afro Americans, and they performed poetry and song relating to the Black experiences in community theaters and things like that. And so I kind of grew up in terms of the performing arts being kind of a part of my life before I knew it was called that. It was
Right.
just a way of being. But I did the singing, I did different things, but dance just sort of took hold of me, especially seeing the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, seeing people who look like me, really, to be blunt,
Yeah.
uh, really gave me that image I needed to lean into.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I've always wanted to know this too. When you're choreographing a piece, where does that process begin? Does it start with the music, or does it start with the images in your head as far as movement? How do you approach choreographing?
Yeah, many choreographers, every choreographer will probably give you a different answer, right? Some people start with ideas, some people start with just moving around with the dancers in space and seeing what happens. But before I was dancing and singing, I was taking piano lessons. So I always start with music first because that's really my motivation. And usually the dance is my way of trying to get the audience to hear the music, right? So I think of myself as a musician more than I do even a choreographer. So that's where it starts for me.
I always found that to be especially characteristic of Alvin Ailey dance performances is that the music is so intricately tied into the movements, and to
Yes.
see people literally express emotion through lyrics and melody has just been something that has always gravitated had me gravitate to you guys and your performances. I find it to be extremely powerful.
Yes. Even in these performances that we'll be doing, one is celebrating my 10th anniversary season. So there's a program that has several of my works, but I just, it makes me think about my childhood and being exposed to singers like Ella Fitzgerald. So there's a duet called Ella that'll be on that program. Nina Simone, there's
Hmm.
a solo that I created to her singing and her voice. So that's always been a motivating factor. And for Ailey to have the soundtrack be as important as the dances so that people kind of remember, each dance based on that soundtrack because
Yeah.
most people grew up with that music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have such an incredible position, and stepping into the shoes that have been worn by Alvin Ailey and Judith Jameson. How do you maintain the history and the legacy of Alvin Ailey while still carving out your own with this company?
Well, I think it has to do for me, you know, the history is such a luxury. It
Mhm.
depends on how you look at it, right? And is history really history? I mean, I know we've had to think about that a lot these days, right? Things that we thought were history are still repeating themselves.
Yeah.
That's in a negative way, but in a positive way, if it was true then, it's true now. And so embracing the history has been always the way I looked at it, and celebrating past, present, and future equally, I
Mhm.
think is important in terms of what I do as a curator and how I view the power of dance. The notion that we're part of a continuum, that we didn't just start here,
Right.
right? That it's been going on. And so I find that empowering. And the other thing is that Alvin Ailey always wanted us not to just entertain, but to educate. So part of that historic work is about the education aspect, that you're learning something while also being entertained and uplifted.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now you're debuting. There's a Chicago premiere called 4-4
Yes.
that's debuting. Can you talk to me about this performance?
I think 4-4, of course, I made this work during the pandemic, and I made it for the digital space, right? For this particular benefit we were doing. And so we needed an opener. And so I thought it would just live on camera. I didn't realize it would actually make its way to the stage until I had completed it. And then my associate artistic director, Matthew Rushing, said, no, we need to do this work. But the music is Wynton Marsalis. I chose one of his works called Delfeo's Dilemma. And I wanted something with a lot of energy, a lot of vibrancy, as only jazz can do, right? And
Mhm.
so, because I was seeing so much work that was heavy because of the time, right? The pandemic, and I wanted something kind of light and fun. But interesting enough, while I was creating it, in my mind, I kept saying, for some reason, I want to introduce the American flag, that I wanted kind of imprinted on the Black body
Mm.
in some way, just a moment, because I think it's been used as such a sort of, it's become weaponized, right?
Yes.
Even when you sometimes see it, on the back of a truck or something, or during the insurrection. I
Mhm.
mean, there's a notion of saying that you don't belong in a way. And we know what that history is. And so I just wanted a moment to reflect on kind of what we've been through, but the notion of jazz is American, right? The
Mhm.
idea of modern dance is American, so I kept thinking of Langston Hughes's poem, I too sing America. Yeah. And so you have that moment. It's only about, a few seconds in the work. And then I just carry on like we often do, right? Acknowledge it, but you have to keep moving forward. So that's kind of the nature of 4-4. But it was really about the energy of us finally getting back in the studio, you know, um, socially distanced. Even in the work, you'll notice that it's 4-4. It's for dancers, but in a way, it's for solos,
Mhm.
because of trying to work with not being so close together. So I think it's a good reflection of what we've been through.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on it earlier, but opening night is going to be basically a celebration of your works over the
Yes.
past 10 years. Um, I can't even believe it's been 10 years since you've kind of taken over as artistic director.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you to have opening night kind of be a celebration of some of the works that you've created?
It's wonderful, I have to say. Over the years, folks I work with have said, oh, we should do more of your work, more of your work. But I wanted the focus to be on other choreographers and on my curating other choreographers. But having come through the fire, right, especially
Right.
in the last couple of years, I don't mind blowing my own horn, as they say,
Yeah.
and we did it at City Center when we were finally back live, and the audience just loved it. And so I'm excited. I mean, I'm blessed to be in this position that I call it a calling,
Mm.
right? It's more duty than it is a job, but it's a gift. And so
Mhm.
now to be 10 years Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, founded in 1958 by the legendary Alvin Ailey, Judith Jamison, me. I mean, I'm still that little boy in a way, sitting in the theater in Miami, seeing the company for the first time. You
Yeah.
know, that's never left me. And so I feel the same way. And Chicago has been an integral part of Ailey's history and the auditorium, especially. And so I'm very excited for Chicagoans to see a bevy of my work. Yeah.
It's always a highlight, because it has become tradition for so many of us who
Yes.
look forward to this time every year. And I love the fact that I do get to see revelations no matter what, but I
Yes.
also get to see newer pieces and pieces done by other choreographers. I remember seeing, I think it was Grace for the
Oh,
first
yes.
time. And because Chicago has such a rich history with house music, so hearing house music and dance, I wanted to jump out of my seat.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
love that about Ailey and your tradition, and pulling all sorts of inspiration from different musical genres that we have roots in, whether it's jazz, whether it's dance music, whether it's classical. I just think it's such a beautiful way to put our history and tell our stories. It's another
Yeah.
way of telling our stories, and I love that we can have those traditions that we can pass down. What is your vision for Ailey as you look to the future?
That anything's possible, that we will continue to be on that precipice, as Judith Jamison would always say, that we'll continue to challenge how this company is viewed. The works that we do that have to do with social justice will continue to be a part of our statement to the world. You know, you brought up house music. I think of a work that Rennie Harris, wonderful street dance choreographer. People usually say hip hop choreographer. And one of the works he created was inspired by the life of Alvin Ailey. It's called Lazarus. That
Mm,
uses house, you know, and
yes.
that kind of, but it goes through the history of lynching and all of the ills of racism. But then at the end, the notion is that we're standing on shoulders, you know, and so he's alive. That's the real cry, is that he's alive through the fact that we're continuing his legacy. And so my vision for the company is to continue to explore different avenues and different ways of sometimes saying the same thing, but in a new way, by
Mhm.
bringing in fresh choreographers with new ideas about how to express the conditions through which we live. But Alvin Ailey said it best, and I always go back to this quote, and it's my vision too. What he was really trying to do is hold up a mirror to society so that people could see how beautiful they are. I
Mm,
think that's just the perfect expression of the company.
yeah, I do too. Well, I
Yeah.
cannot wait to see. I always go more than once because you just can't just see one show. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to attending with my family as always. I cannot thank you enough for talking to the Chicago Defender.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be coming back.
Yes.